Thank you all for coming. Thank you all for coming. We were supposed to do this last month, I think, with the free entry thing. Just because we've been going just over a year now, it's just nice to see the same faces and some new faces and just to say thanks. And of course, with the cost of living, I'm not sure what difference we're making saving you up to fiver, but fivers of what's that, like 10 minutes of central heating or something. And it's free entry, but you haven't seen this kind of crap yet, so wait until you get through this.
We're charging you.
That's it, yeah. You can't ask for any money back, so, you know. But it'll just be the normal format, 45 minutes or so, great. Martin's done really well. I know you look forward to these raffle prizes. He's got his obligatory free oils right the way up to some top class mini storage boxes. No, they were 50p.
Toyota, not mini.
And some shameless self-promotion, but I have brought a few of my books as well, should anybody want to buy one of those as well. And we've got some light papers down here, if anybody wants to take one of those home as well.
The latest one?
It is the latest one, yeah. So, without further ado, I'm not going to introduce myself, that'd be a bit cringe. So, we'll just get cracking. So, tonight's going to be about paranormal. So again, probably should have done it in October for Halloween, but it's that's what I do. So I investigate haunted houses and locations and stuff like that. And throughout the years, I've kind of worked, as you do, you theorise about what it could be and what it could do and what actually is the paranormal. So tonight I've kind of thrown together a few of my presentations. So there's a bit of everything for you. So there's me moaning a lot, which is just normal. There's some really good evidence, and there's some stories and some of my experiences as well. So try and cater to all of that. I do operate any questions, just throw your hands up, as long as we keep them short and sweet. Because there's nothing worse than having a question and then getting to the end and forgetting what your question was. So let's crack on. So what is the paranormal? So it is really easy to forget. People always think the paranormal is just a ghost. That's what we've come to associate the paranormal with. But the definition of it really is anything outside of what we would accept as normal. And in a society that we live in currently, there's a lot of stuff that lives outside of the normal. So I've just listed a few here, but UFOs and aliens, cryptids, so your cryptozoological creatures like your Bigfoot and your Mothman and things like that, ghosts, and much, much more. This is all paranormal, and people don't think that. People just think that the paranormal is a ghost and a ghoulie, but it is more. And I asked the question: are they connected? So there's been loads of researchers, not just myself. There's obviously the most famous for me is John Keel, who investigated the Mothman Chronicles and all that. You're familiar with the Mothman?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a fascinating story. Richard Gere, who was in the film, awful film. But the actual story itself is fascinating, and he really kind of took hold of this multi-dimensional theory where there's multiple things all going on at once, and it's not just kind of siloed events that are happening. And the problem we have, and I'll get into this a little bit later, but these are treated as separate fields amongst researchers. So you can go to a UFO group, and not many of them will really believe in these. Or you can talk to a paranormal investigator, i.e. a ghost hunter, and they won't really have an interest in these. And people are very, individual, and unfortunately that they kind of box themselves in and pigeon themselves in, and they don't open themselves up to the wider possibility that there's more going on. And once you actually ask that question, are they connected? Theorising what this could be becomes so much easier, because you're not boxing yourself in anymore. You're opening up a world of possibilities as to what it could be. So some people may have seen this graph before if they've seen me speak before, so I won't apologise. So this is something that I use to explain partly what I believe paranormal is. So we're all aware of the light spectrum, and we're all aware of the visible light, and that's just this little bit that we can see here. And that they used to say 99.95% of the light spectrum we can't interact with. Right, Chris? But it's actually, they actually think it's a lot less that we can interact with. So they actually think now we're sat at like 0.035% of the light spectrum we can interact with now. And that's mainstream science saying this. So if you can imagine you're in this room now, what we can see and perceive is 0.035% of the light spectrum. So that's 99.965, maths was never my strong point, percent of this room we can't interact with now. We can't see it, we can't perceive it. But imagine what that means. What is around us now in this area? There's a world of possibilities, realms upon realms that we just can't interact with now. We've invented things that allow us to. So when you go on, anyone been on ghost hunts, ghost investigations? I don't like calling them hunts. I never catch anything. Yeah. So you're all kind of aware of the tools that we use, the ultraviolet torches, the infrared, and all that kind of stuff. So the ultraviolet, as you can see, is just out of our field. Same with the infrared, but we've got these tools now that allow us to interact with these fields. And I mean, the ultraviolet, apart from showing you how dirty your bed is and your kitchen, never turn one of those on. Never turn one of those on in front of your wife in the kitchen after you've just cleaned it, because she'll have a field day with it. Infrared, obviously, we call them thermal imaging cameras, and it shows the heat that's given off from hot objects. I mean, we've caught a lot using infrared cameras, and obviously radios and microwaves, X-rays and gamma rays. But when we're using the equipment that allows us just to briefly step outside of our perception range, we actually see a lot. And there's a lot of claims, people who are using ultraviolet torches, for example. I spoke to a guy about a month or so ago, and he lit up an entire room with ultraviolet torches and was getting shadows left, right and centre, was seeing a lot of stuff. When he turned those off and just reverted back to his normal standard torches, he wasn't getting anything, wasn't seeing any shadows. So what he was seeing was operating within the ultraviolet spectrum. And if you think about animals, you know, when your cat kind of sits and stares up into the corner of the room and you think, what are they looking at? There's nothing there. Well, they can actually see into these spectrums. And obviously you have reptiles that can see into the infrared. That's how they hunt their prey at night. They can see the heat being emitted. So their perception of the world is completely different to ours. So it's all about perception. It really is a matter of perception. And if you imagine, I always use the analogy of a radio station. So if you're listening to Radio 1, does that mean that Radio 2 doesn't exist? It still exists. You're just tuning into Radio 1, like our brain is tuning into this reality now. If you change that dial and tune into Radio 2, Radio 1 still exists, you've just changed the dial. That's all that's happened. It's still there, you're just not connected anymore. And have you ever had in your car where two radio stations have crisscrossed and you get a mishmash of songs and then it fixes itself and goes back to normal? Well, I think that's what's happening when we have these brief encounters with the paranormal. That our radio is malfunctioning, seeing alternate frequencies that we wouldn't normally see, and then it fixes itself. Have you ever heard stories such as the UFO vanished before my eyes, the ghost disappeared right in the middle of the room, Bigfoot walked behind a tree, didn't come out the other side of the tree? All these kind of stories. And I would argue that he did come out the other side of the tree, and that the UFO didn't vanish, it's still there, and that the ghost didn't disappear, it's still there. But what's happened is your radio has fixed itself and you just can't see it anymore. So they're always there. So this is a really good graphic just to put into perspective for you, even when you don't think about it from a paranormal perspective, just how little of the world we can see and what's going on around us. And if you think about when you're using your senses, you know, the reason we investigate these locations in the dark isn't because ghosts only come out at night. It's because in the dark, your other senses are heightened, and you might not believe it when you see it with your eyes. So a lot of people will say, I feel like there's someone stood next to me. But if they actually could see that no one was stood there, they would convince themselves that there's nothing there. And so they're ignoring their other senses that are heightened when you're doing this kind of stuff in the dark. So the next time your cat is staring into the corner of your room, just bear in mind what it might be looking at. You just don't know what it's looking at. We used to have a family dog who would regularly run out of the kitchen, sit in the doorway growling in the kitchen for about 10 minutes before he would finally go back and sit in there. And the one day, there was myself, my dad and my brother, we were watching Match of the Day. I think we were all quite drunk, but not that drunk. And we were watching Match of the Day. We must have been. The
Stars
Albion.
in your eyes?
The Albion one, I mean, because they're never in the Premier League. What's the stars in your eyes? And so we were sat watching Match of the Day, and through the curtains, my mum's house is very active, and through the curtains came a ball of light, about so big. It came in about 6 foot or so, into the middle of the living room, dropped down to about 3 or 4 inches off the floor, and then went into the kitchen. And this was a solid ball. It wasn't like a light, like a beam of light that looks flat on the wall. This looked 3D. And we all just kind of sat staring at this thing coming in and followed it into the kitchen. And then the dog ran out and started growling and barking into the kitchen. So we've gone into the kitchen to see what this thing is. Nothing there, completely gone. And it took about 10 minutes or so for the dog to finally go back to bed in the kitchen. But I think what we saw there was what the dog was seeing regularly, but we just caught a glimpse of it. And to this day, people have said ball lightning. Well, you get that smell of sulphur supposedly with ball lightning. We didn't get any of that. It was moving really, really slowly. We just didn't know what it was. I had someone tell me it was a car light that was driving past, but he would have had to have crashed into the living room in order for it to have been that kind of thing. So we can talk about some theories now on what is a ghost, what is a spirit. So you hear this thing within the paranormal field. You hear this thing that, well, a ghost is a replay, and it's something that is like a memory that's etched into the stone or the fabric of a building, and a spirit is intelligent, and it can interact with you, and it can interact with the world around you. I think that's bollocks, really, because I don't understand where there's any scientific evidence to suggest that the ghost is that. It's just another name. It's just something else that people call a ghost, and they just call them a spirit. So has anyone ever heard of the stone tape theory? No? So for those that haven't, the stone tape theory is kind of what I just said. So the energy of this living being has etched itself into the fabric of the building, and therefore it is replaying over and over again, like a tape. Now if you imagine you live in the same house for 40 years, you get up in the morning, you go downstairs, you make your coffee, you go upstairs, you get ready, you go to work, and you do that every day for 40 years. You're going to etch some kind of memory onto that fabric of the buildings, according to this theory. You walk into places and you might shudder, and you might think, oh, don't like it in here, something bad's happened in here. And then you find out that actually it did, something bad did happen. And that's because you're picking up on the emotions that supposedly have etched themselves into the fabric of that building. You're picking up on the atmosphere within that room. And that's what people think stone tape theory is. That's a theory surrounding what ghosts could be. The problem with that is it doesn't account for the intelligent hauntings that we have, and the intelligent paranormal activity where a ghost can talk to you and interact with you. Because if it was a memory, then you didn't exist in their lifetime, so how can it talk to you and interact with you? So it doesn't quite account for that. Spirits being dead people. So this is a really common theory, that all spirits, all ghosts, were once living flesh and blood human beings or animals and whatnot. But again, that doesn't count for certain things. So I interviewed a guy on my podcast a long time ago who saw a ghost train, a literal, I'm not talking on the end of Southport Pier or whatever, but he actually saw a train through the field full of people, but he saw the train itself. No tracks, just a train running through the field. So he saw an inanimate object. Now, if that's not a living thing, how can he see the ghost of a train? So it shows that it can't just be spirits of dead people. He almost had a time slip there. And if you think that spirits are dead people, why would a dead person choose to haunt a tunnel in the middle of a field where no one ever goes? And he's just dying to say boo to someone, but no one ever goes there. Why is he choosing to haunt that tunnel? He could go anywhere, he's consciousness. Why does he choose to stay there? So I'm not quite brought into that theory, to be honest. Time slip theory, so we're all aware of time slips, where people have gone back. I've got a couple of stories we can tell on time slips. Our imagination and personal manifestation, which is where I'm going with what I believe it to be. So just got some more information on the stone tape theory. So Henry H. Price, he was a Welsh philosopher, was also a parapsychologist. He had a theory that he referred to as the psychic ether. He believed that there was a realm where all thoughts and memories were stored, and this realm could be seen by those such as psychics where they had access to the memories and could relay them back to the living world. So that's like a 19th century version of Google Cloud or something like that. So thoughts are going up into the Google Cloud, and then the CIA can access all of your memories. Other researchers began to expand on this, theorising that memories were actually stored in fields of energy, and that's the key word in all of this, is energy, that were sometimes seen by the living in what we would understand as a paranormal experience. So you're seeing the energy form of somebody's thought, essentially, or someone living. Researchers in modern times see the stone tape theory, also known as a residual haunting, as activity that seems to repeat itself over and over as if in a loop. If the entity ignores its surroundings and the people observing the activity, it's deemed to be because they are recording or an imprint, a tape that is being rewound and played time and time again. So that's kind of an overview of what stone tape theory is, but it's interesting where it started from, this theorising that it's from energy or from some kind of cloud of energy. Time slips. So many people have purported to have time travelled, albeit briefly, and encountered times gone by. Some encounters are brief, with the experiencer encountering one or two people who seem to be dressed in period clothing. But other encounters have seen an entire street transport back in time, with the vehicles on the road being replaced with horses and carts, the shops changing and the fashion changing. And Britain has many reported time slips, but the most common in Britain is Bold Street in Liverpool. That's where most time slips have been seen. Of course, you've only got to go to Dudley and you feel like you're in the 70s anyway. I can vouch that is not a time slip. That's literally just Dudley. So I've put together a couple of stories from some news articles for time slips. I appreciate it's quite small, so I'll read it out for you. So the first story happened in Bold Street in Liverpool. The tale goes that 19-year-old Sean had been shoplifting in the area. Now, it's in Liverpool. I don't think there's a connection with the shoplifting, man.
Not exactly the news.
No, that's not news. No, that's been going on for years. No time slip that. He'd been shoplifting in the area when a security guard quickly noticed and approached the young man. Sean proceeded to run down an alleyway in an attempt to shake off the guard, only to find it was a dead end. Turning around, he expected to see the presence of the security guard hot on his heels, but the guard was nowhere to be seen. He walked back out into the street, and bafflingly, the road had changed entirely from the minute he was just there. People were dressed strangely, cars looked peculiar, outdated, and even the roadworks, which Sean had just seen moments earlier, were gone. He attempted to use his mobile phone, but he had no signal. The young man was by now wholly bewildered as to what was happening and tried to piece the puzzle together. He stumbled to a kiosk where, to his horror, he saw the date on a broadsheet that said 18th of May, 1967. Somehow, Sean had managed to travel back in time for some 39 years. By now, in panic, he began to run. As he did, he could just about make out the streets of his hometown, beginning to form some semblance of normalcy. He stopped and looked around at the now modern-day street, and where he'd run from still looked like that old-fashioned street. So he's looking back, and he's seeing this old-fashioned street. He's looking ahead, and he can see the streets that he recognises. He jumped on a bus and made a quick escape. While some have put Sean down as not having the most reliable testimony, as he was shoplifting, it's what a story to tell your mum. The security guard, she said, "Where's the lamb I sent you out to nick?" He said, "Well, I got, time slipped." The security guard who chased young Sean has something interesting to say. So he spoke to a journalist and he mentioned that when he was chasing Sean, they headed into that dead-end alleyway where the guard visibly witnessed Sean inexplicably vanish into thin air. The details Sean gave about the 1967 Bold Street firmly answered exactly how the street would have looked then. So he got it accurate as well. He described the street accurately for the time. He's told his story many times and has always remained consistent. And both men have stated that they were profoundly affected by what happened to them in 2006. Has anyone ever watched Goodnight Sweetheart? Yeah. Seems like that, where you walk up the alleyway and disappear back into World War II. So yeah, a very interesting story there. Another short one here from the same street. So just 10 years earlier than that, so we're into the mid-90s now. Frank and Carol, a married couple, were out for a day shopping in Liverpool city centre. Carol decided she wanted to go to a bookshop. They were held up, however, when Frank bumped into an old friend and they got chatting. Carol went on ahead, walking to the bookshop herself. When Frank finally said bye to his friend, he travelled to Bold Street where he was supposed to see the bookshop. but when he got there, it had changed its names to Crips, with the new name displayed above the door. It soon became clear that the store was no longer a bookshop, but a women's boutique, with clothing and handbags adorning the windows display. Before he went in, Frank heard a van passing whose signage said Cardins on the side. The van gave out an old-fashioned beep from its horn, and upon looking closer, Frank soon noticed that all of the cars going past him were old-fashioned, as if they were from the 50s. He was beginning to feel on edge when a woman in modern clothing also approached the front of the shop. She smiled at Frank while looking somewhat confused at the shop front. Nevertheless, they entered Crips together to discover that inside it had returned to being a bookshop, with not a lady's handbag in sight. The woman appeared puzzled, remarking to Frank that she thought it was a new woman's store before turning around and leaving. It should be noted that Frank was a retired police officer and not a man to give rise to tales of the paranormal, yet there seems to be very little other explanation for the events. As it would turn out, Crips was a store on that same spot in Bold Street many years previously, and similarly, Carlin's, the name that was on the side of the van, was also a thriving business in Liverpool at one time, but the company was long gone by 1996. So he's had a very similar experience. He's kind of slipped back in time a little bit. Either that, or he's an avid cross-dresser, and his wife caught him in a women's boutique, and he's tried to make up some elaborate story as to why he got caught.
You've all been there.
We have all been there, yeah. Not been there, but yeah, we've been there. So yeah, that's just a couple of examples of time slips. You hear about them all the time, you know. Sometimes it can literally just be someone sat in their home looking out the window and they notice all the cars going past them are old style cars before it just goes back to normal. So what's going on here? Well, you know, is this person time travelling? Well, is it possible that when we're seeing ghosts, we're having some form of time slip? We're at that moment in time interacting with their time period. So when they say the ghost walked through the wall, or the ghost was floating, or you couldn't see their legs, that's because in their time period the wall wasn't there, or the ground might have been a bit lower or a bit higher, hence why it looks like they're floating. But they're walking through doorways which you can't see anymore, so to you they're just walking through the wall. So they're kind of going about their day-to-day in their world while you're existing in yours. And there was a great programme on, it was on the BBC, but it was like a dramatisation programme, and it was about this guy or woman, and she'd inherited this old farmhouse, and she was going in, it was very derelict, she had to do it all up. So she was investigating the family, where she got it from, how she inherited it. And at the same time, there's a story going on about 200 years previous, where this farmer was looking after the farm, had all these farmers out on working his land, and it's kind of got two stories running simultaneously. And what happens is, he begins to see ghosts. He begins to hear loud noises in the sky. He begins to see two lights driving past his house down the lane. So he's seeing planes and cars, and it's driving him mad. And then eventually the great-great-granddaughter, or whatever she is, goes to investigate the house just to see what it's like. And she's walking around with an iPhone, with a torch, trying to see what she can see. And he gets out of bed having heard something in his house. And as he walks down the corridor, he's confronted by a bright light and some woman talking as she comes near him. And then he's losing his mind. And the people in his time period are thinking he's going mad. And he ends up getting sectioned and losing everything, hence why the farm falls into disrepair. So it's this great story of these two time periods coming together. And she thinks she's seeing a ghost. He thinks he's going absolutely crazy. But actually, they're just some kind of time slip is happening. It's a great programme. I have to try and remember what it was called. But I might have a look at the break. But that's kind of how I see time slips happening. That we're kind of having this blend into another time. And if you think that time isn't linear, which I'm sure we probably all agree in some form or another, that time, you know, there is no future, there is no past, it's all now. If that's the truth, then everything that ever happened and ever will happen is happening right now. So there's no reason why we wouldn't have these brief interactions with people that are just going about their day to day, but in different time periods. There is one flaw to this though, and you never really hear about time slips the other way. You know, you never hear someone reporting to have seen the Jetsons flying over their house or something. And they're always going past. Why is that? Now, I've had a think about this, and if you think about we manifest our own reality, firm believer in that, and we'll get onto a little bit of that in a second. But if we manifest our own reality, everything that we perceive can only be perceived from what we already know, what we learn. Now, if you look at UFO sightings, they're always saucer-shaped back in the day of saucer-shaped UFOs. And then as technology's progressed, they turn into, we've had cigar shapes, we've had triangle shapes, and it's whatever the flavour of the month is. So people are having this thought put into their head, so when they see a UFO, well, there's been a lot of triangular UFO sightings lately, so they will manifest a triangular UFO sighting. How many people see flying saucers now? No one really. And the reason people used to see a lot of flying saucers was when, was it Kenny Farmer who had the first flying saucer sighting? He claimed that it looked like a flying saucer, so that was what the media put out there. All of a sudden, there's a huge spate of flying saucer, people seeing flying saucers in the sky. So it's whatever the media is telling you, people are taking that on and manifesting their reality in that way. Now, because we haven't perceived the future, as far as we're aware, it's very difficult then for us to manifest that reality into what we can see, because we've never experienced it. Am I keeping you here? You all make sense, yeah? They can only manifest what they know, which is the past. That's what they're taking their experiences from. So, any questions around what we've discussed so far? Quick check. Doing well. Right, so.
One, is there any thoughts as to why it happens a lot on that street?
I don't know, so I've looked at this, and there doesn't seem to be any other place in the UK where there's frequent things happening. There's about 5 or 6 that I could have pulled from, just on Bold Street alone. I don't know.
There's no reason as to why.
Oh,
So, what if we are creating our own paranormal experiences? Has anyone ever considered that? Yeah? So I've kind of taken it a step further. So, if you think about when we see, people say to me, well, if we're creating our own experiences, how do we share, people sharing experience? They both see a shadow, or both see a man, and stuff like that. Well, we can both listen to Radio 1 if we're tuning into that particular frequency, you know? So if we're tuning into that particular paranormal frequency, we will see the same things. So this is a very crappy diagram that I made, but I believe that there's something called the collective consciousness. Now, if we go back to what those people were talking about earlier, where they spoke about this energy kind of cloud that's up there where all our thought forms go, I think that they are onto something there. And the collective consciousness is us. We're all consciousness. People call it spirit or soul or whatever, but it's consciousness. And all we are at its base form is just a bunch of atoms vibrating to a particular frequency, and that's Kieran. And we call myself Kieran, but it's just a biological vessel that's keeping this energy within us. And we can't destroy energy, we can only displace energy, as Albert Einstein once said. So when we die, and this energy is no longer contained within this biological vessel, it is free to go where it wants. Because at the minute, it's trapped within this 5-sense reality. You know, it can't get out of that light spectrum, that visible light part of the light spectrum. Once we die and the energy is free to go where it wants, it will join back into the collective consciousness. So the collective consciousness is everything there ever was, is, and will be. And that is what we all are now. We just forget it while we live in this experience. So, if you imagine you're lying in bed and you see that woman at the bottom of your bed, it might be your mum, it might be your sister or someone, and they passed and you're seeing them stood at the bottom of your bed. And they're talking to you. I'm sure we've all had this experience, strange women at the bottom of your bed talking to you. And when they're standing there looking at you, you think, wow, it must actually be my mum. So now we're thinking about that theory where it's a dead person. It must be a dead person because my mum was once living and she knows everything about me. She stood there talking to me, asking me how my daughter is and all of this. Now, why are you seeing your mum? Is it because subconsciously you want to see your mum? You know, you miss your mum. It's natural. You miss your dog, you miss your brother, you miss your friend. So subconsciously you want to see these people again. So what happens is there's now a point of attention at the bottom of your bed, a frequency point of attention. Literally, Radio 1 is stood at the bottom of your bed and it's waiting for you to tune that radio station in so you can hear it. In this instance, it's a point of attention waiting for you to look at it, decode that frequency with your radio, your brain, and therefore manifest what that point of attention is. In this case, your mum. So the reason it's your mum, and she can stand there and tell you everything about you, is because she is collective consciousness. She was your mum. She's my mom. She's everybody's mom. She knows everything about everything because she's collective consciousness. You're tapping into that collective consciousness and drawing from it what you want from it. Now, the Virgin Mary has never appeared to me because I'm not religious. Never seen Jesus in a piece of toast. But people that do see the Virgin Mary are religious. She only ever appears to religious people. She never appears to people that don't believe in the Virgin Mary. You know, ghosts, they never really appear to skeptics. If they don't believe in ghosts, they won't see a ghost. It just won't happen. If people go out hunting for a Bigfoot, you will find evidence of a Bigfoot. You know, so what's happening is you're manifesting your own wants and needs, your own subconscious desires, and getting back what you're putting out there. And a lot of people believe this with the law of attraction and all of that type of stuff. I think that's what's happening with the paranormal. So this point of attention, it's the same point of attention. Be that the Bigfoot, be that an alien, be that a ghost. It's the same thing that's happening, but you're getting back what you want. Now this opens up a world of possibilities. It means that aliens are potentially interdimensional, they're not interplanetary. How many I don't know if you're saying it like you've done it, but if you've researched alien abduction cases, there are so many that claim they never actually left their bed. And there's a huge movement at the moment within the UFO field that are now beginning to realise that UFO abductions aren't abductions at all. They are not leaving their bed. Even though they feel like they're on a ship and their surroundings have changed and they feel like they're no longer lying in their house, they have never left their bed. So it's almost like this being has shifted their reality, changed their perception of reality to make them think they are now somewhere else. But they're not. They are literally just lying on their bed. People have claimed to have been taken up through solid ceilings, through solid windows. So that shows that this being is shifting our reality, shifting our nature of reality. But I think we have that power. So I think we're creating these experiences ourselves. And one of the recent investigations I've been doing in that house in Essex, which some of you may know, for those that have spoken to me about it, every time they have a kick-up in activity, something traumatic has happened or something bad has happened with their family. And there's so many hauntings that exist where places have, teenage girls going through puberty. Or in this house, they've had 3 of those girls. They also have autistic twins, obviously 2, but autistic twins are about 7 or 8 at the time that this started happening. So you have this weird, crazy energy going on, and they are a chaotic family. And it's almost like a tulpa. We've heard of tulpas, where we can create our own. It's almost like that's what this is. They're creating, their energy is creating this haunting. And when they're happy and their family's happy and everything's going okay, which is rare, but it happens, nothing happens. Their house is quiet. And it's really making me think that they're creating this haunting themselves. Any questions around that?
And does it relate to the Akashic records, the morphic field? Are they linked, do you think? Or are they all the one thing, the same thing, possibly?
Well, again, you think about that kind of energetic type field, and to me, potentially, yeah.
Yeah.
There was something that Nikola Tesla, was quoted as saying, he was saying that his brain was only a transceiver,
Yeah.
that he was able to access.
Well, you think about what he wanted to do, where he was given that free electricity from those towers. So he was tapping into all this energy around us and converting it into free electricity. Of course, they didn't like that, to get rid of that. But that's essentially what he was doing. He was tapping into this, because he was massively aware of what was going on. Hugely aware. Very clever guy. Okay, so I need myself sitting in the corner waving. 5 minutes or so. Okay, so we'll do a little bit on this. So trigger warning. So I'm now going to start talking about the trouble with theories and the problems with theories. But I'm also potentially going to say something that might trigger some of you if you have your beloved favourite paranormal investigator or your beloved favourite conspiracy podcast host or something. So I apologise, but I might insult some of you. So, the problem with theories. So a theory is not set in stone. That is what a theory is. It's loose, it's fluid. The evidence should always guide the theory, not the other way around. So I have my theories, and sometimes I come across evidence, or someone in an audience asks me a question and makes me think. And then I go away and think, oh, that means I've got to shift my theory then, because it's obviously not quite right. What a lot of people do, though, is they will shift the evidence to fit their theory, which is the complete wrong way around. So they will have a theory, it is set in stone, and they will ignore any evidence that goes against their theory and only accept evidence that fits their theory. But this is really wrong, because they're potentially eliminating some game-changing evidence. But just because they're so tunnel vision on what their theory is, they won't accept it. A lot of researchers, investigators. So here I am talking about the paranormal, but if the shoe fits, so put this onto any UFO investigators, any conspiracy investigators, whatever. They're so adamant of their theory that they will cherry pick evidence to back it up whilst ignoring evidence that may discredit it. And some even go as far as doing their best to discredit other researchers' work and theories. We've all seen that, haven't we? Particularly in the UFO field, constant politics, people arguing, you have the kind of flesh and bone UFO fanatics and you have the interdimensional fanatics, and they're at each other's throats, they can't coexist. But why? Why are these investigators like this? Why will they not open up to somebody else's theory? Anybody want to... There's no one answer. There's what people's opinions are.
They themselves too strongly to what they believe, and that's become their identity.
Yeah,
So
it's
they
an
don't want to be
ego.
challenged by somebody else.
You read my presentation?
No.
You are psychic.
From a psychological point of view, they call it ego.
Ego, that's exactly right, yeah. So, I mean, I use one word, but it's similar really, but it's relevance. They're relevant for their theory. They get their 15 minutes of fame. They get to go on, I don't know, Discovery Channel and be a talking head on a documentary. They get to sell a few books. They get to go to Truth Juice and they get to talk there and all this kind of stuff. And they're relevant. They feel great about themselves. The problem is someone else comes to them and starts challenging them and saying, well, actually, that theory is not right, and I've got some new evidence that might suggest that that's not right. And all of a sudden, they're challenged. All of a sudden, people might look at them and go, well, you're old news, you know, this guy's got some good stuff now, and I'm going to start listening to this guy. And what they need to do, really, is come together and realise that it's all evidence. And what their kind of attitude is that everyone's an expert, so they all think that they're an expert themselves, and that everyone else knows nothing. So I know everything, and anyone else's opinion doesn't matter. But why? Well, it's for relevance, popularity, fame, money, and of course insecurity as well. Now, my favourite guy for this is, one of my favourites, is Nick Pope. Can't stand the guy. Can't stand the guy. He's literally a paid talker. I've seen him on programmes that are discrediting UFOs. So he's on there discrediting UFOs. I've seen programmes that are crediting UFOs, so he's on there telling you that UFOs are real. He used to work for the MOD. He's the British Fox Mulder, apparently, but the people at the MOD have said he never worked there and never did what they said. Huge kind of politics going on there. But he's literally going where the money is, where the relevance is. And so he's kind of taking it one step further, and he's not sticking to one theory, he's just a bit of a money chaser. He'll just go wherever he needs to go.
He's a whore.
He's a whore, yeah, that's exactly right. But, you know, most people, they just can't be challenged. And so they will have an agenda, and they will stick to it. Can I go over it?
Yeah.
That's my club. They'll stick to their agenda at whatever cost. At whatever cost. And to the point where they begin to just look stupid, some of these people, you know? And what they need to do is they need to come together, because they need to realise, well, actually, you've got some evidence, I've got some evidence, he's got some evidence over there. It's not quite the same, but if we actually sat down together, we've all got a piece of the puzzle. And if we put it together, we might solve this a lot quicker. Now, some would argue that these kind of communities, paranormal, the ufology community, whatever, they all have gatekeepers, apparently. And these are all put in place to have this happen, to create division. So we can never actually sit down and put the pieces of the puzzle together. You know, they're all forcing you over here, look over there, aliens are interplanetary, you know, they're flesh and blood. Well, actually, the truth might lie a bit closer to being interdimensional. But no one's going to look over there, because the one guy that said that thought the queen was a lizard, and so no one really looks over there, so they're all looking over here. And that's what these gatekeepers are supposedly brought in to do. I don't think Nick Pope's a gate. I don't think he would operate a gate, to be honest. So very quickly then, if I'm being kicked off, just to show you how everyone's an expert, I took this off. I follow a few ghosting groups on Facebook. So this was a photo of some. I don't know who it was. Like I say, it's just on a group. Obviously some kind of prom, high school prom or something. So that's a photo. Note this person here. And then in the next photo was this. Now, this was shown on the group. It was 2 photos, and the person was going, "Oh, what have I captured here at my daughter's prom and all this kind of stuff? What is this?" And these are some of the comments that I took off that post on Facebook, because everyone's an expert. "Wow, you caught the Grim Reaper on camera. That's crazy. Does she have a loved one that's passed? Because they may have been there. That looks like a male from the profile. Kind of weird, it's so black." I got the Grim Reaper vibes as well. Very scary picture. Lacalica, you know what it is. Your days are numbered. Wow. They know all of that just by looking at those 2 photos. You know, this person knows that they've just lost a loved one. This guy's obviously quite close with the Grim Reaper. You can recognise him. But actually, let's look at it. So you've got that person there, 3/4 type trousers, see a bit of a leg there, black top. It's so black. Remember that one comment? Well, you've got the black top, you've got the 3/4 trousers, you can still see the leg. You've got the disco light here, which is creating this flare here, which you couldn't see before because she's kind of blocking it, and it's on a purple light at the time. The green light's interacting badly with the camera. This person's taken a step back, motion blur, and there's your light. So, am I right, or is it the Grim Reaper?
Grim Reaper.
Grim Reaper. It's a better story. It's a better story. But the problem is, you get these people that genuinely believe this stuff. You know, that they will sit on Facebook and convince these people, "You've just caught the Grim Reaper. Oh, I'm getting bad vibes from this." I mean, what was the one? Looks like a male from the profile. I mean, where's she looking? I can't quite see anything down here. I don't know why it looks like a male. I don't get it. I don't get where they've got that comment from.
The best comment would have been, "Looks like a Grim Reaper, lol."
Lol. Yeah, waiting for a lol at the end. So it's ridiculous that you're getting this kind of stuff. This is what people call like researchers in the paranormal field. So I'll just end on this. With paranormal evidence, can we ever trust what we see or hear again? Ever? What do you think? Well, keep an open mind. Yeah, I don't think we can ever trust what we see or hear again. So as I've done this throughout the years, my kit bag from spirit boards, K2 meters, and all this stuff has got smaller and smaller and smaller.
Yeah.
To the point where now, when I go and investigate, it's really, I might take a voice recorder, and me. That's it. Because the only thing I can really trust is me. And you think of all this equipment that can be messed with, it can be malfunctioned and all that kind of stuff. I know what I'm seeing and I trust myself. If I want to lie and tell people, "Yeah, I just saw something, it was really cool," and that's me being a dickhead and I've got to go to sleep knowing that. But ultimately I can only really trust myself and what I see and what I sense. And with CGI and Photoshop and all that, you could show someone, a skeptic, what's the point? What is the point in evidence? Because you can show a skeptic the best piece of evidence you've ever caught, and they'll go, Photoshop. They'll say, "That's CGI, I don't believe in that's rubbish." So you're not convincing them. And then you'll show someone that already believes, and they already believe, so what's the point in showing them? Because they already believe in the paranormal, and they don't need convincing. So what's the point? What's the point in collecting all this evidence? Maybe I'm just a bit long in the tooth with it now, and I just feel a bit fed up with it. But for me, it's just become a very personal experience, ghost hunting. It's become a very personal experience where if I experience it, I can go to bed that night knowing that I've had a really cool experience, and that's all that matters. Because it's personal to you, because it's all about perception. People I've stood next to will say, "Oh, can you see this big shadow in the door?" And I'm stood there going, "I can't see a thing." But that doesn't mean they're lying. It just means that they're tuning into Radio 1 while I'm still listening to Radio 4. I don't know why you do that. But they're just having a different perception at the time. They're not lying, they're just seeing something slightly different. They're having their own personal experience. If you can capture it with a camera or something, great, but there's no need. There's no need for that. And in the next half, I'll get a little bit into modern technology and why that's ruining paranormal investigation. And I've also got some evidence to show you, some cool evidence from that house in Essex as well, which one might be nice to see. So Martin's going to come around with the raffle book. I do have some books if you do want some of them. But do play the raffle. Martin's got some evidence for this.
Oh, yeah.
And we'll see you in 25 minutes or so. Are we ready for part 2?
Yeah.
Is anybody not here? What do you say? Okay, so I thought we would start part 2 with story time. Are you all sitting comfortably? So I've just listed just a few things, because if I was to tell you everything, we'd be here all night. So we'll talk about this red orb first. So some of you may have seen this, some of you may not. But this happened when we were investigating in a place called Drakelow Tunnels. Anyone heard of Drakelow Tunnels? Yeah. It's a great place. They don't do paranormal. They don't do. Sorry. No. They don't do the paranormal investigations there anymore, which is a shame. But a bit of an inside thing. So we used to pay roughly £300 for the night at Drakelow Tunnels, and that meant we could turn up at about 9 o'clock, and we'd leave about 4:30, 5 in the morning. So you got a fair bit for your money, and that was the going rate. Any group would pay about £300. Most Haunted went down there and did an investigation, and then after that, the going rate was about £700 because they realised what they could charge. Now, so while I'm on this topic of Most Haunted, me and my wife got married in Hayden Hill in Craiglee. So Old Hill probably. So we got married in the Victorian house in Hayden Hill Park. And while I was there, I said to the woman, any chance I could come and investigate this place? Like, it looks quite good. And she said, oh no, we never do anything like that here. We just wouldn't let people like that here. And I said, okay, fine. Didn't let him ruin my day, like I was getting married. That ruined it enough. And then we went on our honeymoon the next day. And so about 10 days or so later, I got back. Literally the day we got back, I've sat on the settee, turned the telly on. I thought, Most Haunted. Let's have a laugh. So I put that on, and where are they? Honest to God, Hayden Hill House. Now you think about the production time and the editing and all that. That must have been filmed months before. So they'd already been there when this woman went, oh no, we don't do anything like that here. But obviously they do if you took enough money at them. And that's the problem with these kind of groups. But that is a completely different talk altogether. So we were down at Drakelow Tunnels, and there's an area of Drakelow Tunnels that is, if anyone's been down there, you'll know it, with a kitchen area. And in front of the kitchen area, you have that big kind of huge open tunnel, and that's where everybody would have sat back in the day. They've had all the canteen tables and stuff there. And so we went down and we decided to play a bit of music. We were down there on our own, so it was about 7 of us or so. We did a Ouija board or a spirit board literally on the kitchen worktop. And we were playing some Vera Lynn at the time, and we got it on loop. It was just on the bell. I was getting a bit bored of it, so I said, right, I'm turning this rubbish off. And the glass just shot straight to no. And I was like, all right, I'll leave it on then. And then we decided to do a bit of dancing. We wanted to encourage some participation. So we went up into that open tunnel in front of the kitchen, and we played some of this wartime music, which would have been the era, and we started to do some dancing, and we captured something really interesting. So, as fascinating as this is, you also have to watch me dance. Northern soul and some ska music, and I'm all yours. But I can't. There was no talcum powder on the floor, so I couldn't dance to this kind of stuff. But so we'll watch it first, and then we'll talk it through, and we'll see what you can see. See if this is where technology breaks. I don't know. What are you gonna play? So it's very cold down there for the people that have been down here before. We used to go outside to warm up. So this is just breath. People are breathing. So you can see all these kind of white orbs, and then you get this. So you're seeing all these kind of white orbs, and they're all going in the same direction. And I'm not a massive believer in orbs because it's just dust. You know, if you're sat at home later tonight, just turn your camera on your phone on and aim it in your living room, and you know, even if you cleaned your house, you'll just see dust everywhere, and you know it's dust because it's all going in the same direction. But every now and then you might get something that acts a little bit more independently, and that's something worth looking at. But in this case, the colour itself was interesting. So what's even more interesting is if you look closely, it's actually two orbs intertwined with each other, as if they're dancing. So you can kind of, you'll see these ones kicking up off the floor. We're in a tunnel, we're kicking up a bit of dust. And then, but they saw it in real time as well. So they saw it with their eyes. They saw this red orb, or these two red orbs, come around me while they were dancing. And it even went round me, you know, like I was in the way of it. So it's a really interesting bit of footage, that. Why is it red? You know, I've often thought, is it something to do with the camera reflecting? But if that was the case, then the other orbs kicking up would also be red. So it's just a really interesting piece of... I've had people try to debunk that because you can see the red badge on my Levi's, and they said, oh, did you just have something like a red sweet wrapper in your pocket or something and it's fell out? I'm in a tunnel, I'm not in a space station. Like, what? How is it floating away like that? So yeah, just to go back. So that's the red orb. The red room now, this is a fascinating one, and this is this kind of gives me the chills a little bit now. So I've spoken to a couple of people during the break who seem to be very empathetic, and they pick up on that, almost that stone tape theory that we discussed with the energies in the room and stuff. So this took place at a place called Graiseley Old Hall in Wolverhampton. Anyone familiar with that? It was dubbed the House That Cries by the BBC because they kept finding a puddle of water right at the bottom of the stairs, and they could never link it to anything. There was no plumbing problem, there was no leaks or anything like that, but they would just find this puddle of water in the floor. And I've got a couple of stories about this. One of them was what I alluded to before the break with the technology, which we'll go into. But the actual experience, that one of the experiences I had there, I called it the Red Room because it was a red room. There was three single beds. There was a vanity table with a little stool, and everything was red. It was honestly a very garish room. So there was about 4 or 5 of us in this room, and there wasn't much room to be walking around with these 3 beds in there. And at the time, I was sat on the stool at this vanity table, just putting my mascara on. And there was people sat on the beds, and then there was this one guy just kind of lurking, just kind of like pacing a little bit, wouldn't really settle. And I said, right, man, just take a seat on the bed, like, just relax. He was making me nervous. And he said, I can't sit down in here, like, I just feel like I can't. And I said, I'll tell you what then, you sit here on the stool and I'll sit on the bed. So he sat on the stool and I sat on the bed, and within about 10 seconds of sitting on the bed, I was in floods of tears, crying my eyes out. So I remember someone asking me what was the matter, and I said, look, if you were to give me a gun now, I'd end it all. Like, there is no hope, I just feel. And this all happened in like 10 seconds. And at the same time that this is happening, there's a lady sat on the bed closest to the door, and she's, you know, those old style latches on those old doors. She's lifted the latch and just opened the door, and someone said, what are you doing? And she said, I've got to open the door, I don't want to be locked in here. We thought this was really strange, really odd. So the experience passed, and we carried on. And then we since found out that there was sexual abuse happening in that room, and to children. And so it would have happened pretty much on these beds. So when I sat on the bed, I imagine I picked up on that. And the reason she didn't want the door locked is because when the door was locked, that's when things would happen. And while we're on the story of the empathy, was anyone ever heard of Whittington Castle in Oswald Street, pretty much on the Welsh border? Great place to visit this. We were looking to get there. And if you've ever been there, there's a big kind of hall, and they hold weddings in there now. And it's, imagine this kind of shaped room, but just 3 or 4 times bigger, if not bigger than that. And at the time, they got all the chairs around the outside of the room, obviously ready for when they need to set up for a wedding. And at the bottom here, they had the altar with a couple of chairs next to it in the corner. So there's about 8 or 9 of us here, and we were just walking around this room, and I sat right at the far end corner, the other end of the altar, and I was sat there, and I was really, really nervous, really anxious, really kind of jittery. And someone said, "Why don't you just get up, walk around?" And I said, "I can't, because I feel like if I move, whatever I'm nervous about is going to happen. Like when you're waiting for your exam results, or you're just really nervous." I was just, I felt a bit on edge. So in the end, I did get up. I walked around, and it passed, and I made my way to the bottom of the room, and I sat in one of the chairs next to the altar, and I sat next to the lady who was our guide for the night. She's opening the doors and making sure we're not graffitiing on the walls and stuff. And while I was sat there, I said, "I tell you what, this is a complete opposite. Like, I feel really powerful, really lordly. I feel like I own the world." And she said, "Oh, that's interesting, because look at what he's doing." And about 10 yards in front of me, my mate was kneeling down in front of me. So I shouted, and I said, "What are you doing?" He said, "I don't know, I just feel like I should be kneeling." And I said, "That's funny, because I feel like you should be too." And that's exactly how I felt. And this lady, she said, "Oh, that's interesting," but she didn't follow up. So anyway, we've carried on with the investigation and finished out the night. And at the end of the night, she came up to me and she said, "What you were experiencing in that room is fascinating, because back in the day, the Lord used that room for his court, and he would have held court down this end of the room, and he would have had the person waiting to be called in front of him held at the other end of the room. So when you're sat up there, you're going to be called in front of the Lord, so you're very nervous, you're very anxious. And then back down here is where he would have sat feeling very powerful and very lordly." And I didn't know any of this. So when I found that out, I was absolutely blown away. But while that was happening, another member of the team, I didn't know at the time because I was having my own personal experience, he was bent double, claiming he'd been shot in his abdomen. He was bent double in absolute agony. He almost had to be carried out of the room and said, I've been shot. So our first instincts were, is he picking up on someone who's been shot with a bow and arrow or something? Is he picking up on a wound? But we actually found that in the 70s, there was a guy walking past the castle out on the street whose appendix had burst, and the nearest place they could rush into was into this room, and he died in that room. And that's what this guy was picking up on. So he's picking up on something from, 40 years ago, while I'm picking up on something from 300-400 years ago. Completely bizarre, but it really adds into that kind of picking up on those time slip, energetic type fields. So that's the red orb, and that's the red room. But the House of Christ, so if modern technology, so we're kind of going off on one here, but modern technology, you think about your traditional technology, what we use, and that's like spirit boards, think even your dowsing rods and your scrying and all of that. And then right the way up to what I would call rather modern technology, and that's things like EVP recorders and stuff like that. Things that are quite useful to use while you're investigating. Things that aren't useful to use are mobile phone apps. So for those that have been on investigations, have you ever witnessed these people using mobile phone apps? For those that haven't, you've saved yourself. Because we went here, and this was during that brief period during the 2 lockdowns. So I was craving to go out and do a bit of ghost hunting. So I booked onto a local team, I won't name them, and we went to Graiseley Old Halls. It's that place where I've had this red room experience. So I'm familiar with it. I've been there time and time again. So we get there, and as usual, they've got their resident media who's going to make sure you have a great night, and they're going to tell you how to feel and tell you what you've seen and make sure that you get your money's worth. But I'm happy with that. It's all part of the experience. What I'm not happy with is a guy who insisted on filming the entire night on Facebook Live. So I'm sat there, and as I've said, I don't use the equipment really, and I just want to experience. So I've got my hood up, I'm eating my sweets, and I'm just sat there in the corner of a room trying to experience. But while I'm doing this, you've got people with these mobile phone apps, and it's shouting out random words. Girl! So then we're going, oh, there's a girl in here, because the mobile phone's just told them the pre-recorded messages. It's just told them there's a girl. And then they'll go, fire! She burned in the fire. And then they'll say, where are you? Over here. She's over there. And then literally by the end of this 15-minute session, they've created this entire backstory of how this girl burnt in a fire. She was stood over there in the corner watching them, communicating with them through this downloaded app off Apple Store for $3.99. That's for the ad-free version, of of course. And then made up this entire story. And of course you do a bit of research and you realise, well, there was never a fire there, no one ever got recorded as burning there, but it must be right because their iPhone told them. And that's the problem that you have with these kind of apps. But so I'm sat there and I'm having this app shout that, there's another guy next door, he's got it on a desktop computer, not even a laptop, he's actually brought a tower computer, hooked up to a huge monitor, and he's got what's called a ghost radar going on. So that's this thing that spins around like this, goes beep, 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 and all of a sudden a blob comes on the screen and it tells you there's a ghost over there. And you look over there and you realise that that's the window, so he's stood next to my Ford. He's out on the car park apparently, that's where he's picking up this ghost. And they go beep, 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 and they're having to be closer, so they're going, oh, he's moving in, he's coming towards us. And that's on this app, and they were watching it on this big screen like they were in a submarine playing war games. So I'm over in the corner trying to just relax, and I just get into the zone, you know, this is all going on, but you can tune it out. The door kicks open, this guy comes in on his phone, so the torch is on, right in my face, going, right guys, we're here at Grace Hill Hall, and we're in the living room now. As you can see, people are investigating. We were investigating, but now I'm blind. And he's literally walking around with his thing, filming to his 10 Facebook viewers or whatever it is. And he did that 3 times throughout the night. Well, he did it 3 times before I left. I left quite early and couldn't do it anymore. But it got me thinking about how I paid money, 35 quid to go to this thing, and they didn't give a shit about you. They were more busy trying to please the 10 viewers they got on Facebook at home. And I thought, well, next time I won't give you 35 quid, then I'll just sit at home and get the same experience, you know? And it's this technology that people are using, in my opinion, is just completely hindering paranormal investigation. It's not making it better in any way whatsoever. So, the house in Essex. So for those that don't know, I've recently released a documentary on YouTube, so you can see all of this evidence in the documentary. The family, I've interviewed all the family, it's about 45 minutes long or so. It's called A Haunting in Essex for anyone that wants to search that on YouTube. But I've just picked a few select things here. So I won't really give you too much of the backstory because watch the documentary. But really, there's a family, quite a chaotic family. They were about 3 teenage girls, multiple dads. The twin autistic children. The girls all had relationships and their boyfriends would stay over. I mean, it's a 3-bedroom house. I don't know where they all stayed, but like it's just constantly chaotic. And they're a lovely family, and they don't mind me saying any of this. But it's all kicked off. And this is just some of the select evidence that we captured. So we set up, over a long period of time, we set up motion sensor cameras, voice recorders. So when I wasn't there, and if the family had gone out, we were still picking stuff up. So this is a recording, and I'm just going to play it. Now I think I know what this says, but anybody know paranormal, where you kind of see patterns or you hear things? So I don't want the power of suggestion. I don't want to put into your head what I think I hear, but you just tell me what you think you can hear, and then we'll see if it sounds the same. See if we can make it work. So can we all hear something there, yeah?
Yeah.
So this was captured on a motion sensor camera. Can we all hear that? Is that loud enough for the people at the back?
Sounds like a gremlin.
Yeah, it does. It sounds very, it's not a nice voice. Could anybody want to have a guess? Anybody hearing anything, any words? No? So if I tell you, I think it says, get out of my house. Ha 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 ha. So now see if you can hear that. Still not hearing that. Fair enough. Fair enough. For anyone that wants to listen to this, feel free to come in. We can have a listen after the break. Now the next one is, so this has got Liam, so this is the dad, and he is he's a big guy, proper Cockney lad. Doesn't really get scared of anything, but this thing has shook him to the core. The things he's had happen to him You'll see some of it here. But here he's just letting the dog in. So he's just letting the dog in. It's on the evening, and this is what we get here. Excuse his toplessness. So there was the growl. It's a growl of some kind, or a burp. Yeah, looks like the kind of girl that will burp a lot. But the initial instinct there is it the dog? The dog's growling. But the dog's in front of him, and he then turns to the dog and says, "You just heard that, didn't you?" So he's obviously not. It's not the dog. Otherwise, he would know it was the dog. So he's heard something there. The cameras picked it up. This next one. So this was me giving a talk at Bristol Truth Juice. I went all the way down to Bristol and I spoke to 5 people. The guy offered me a tenner and said, "It's all I can give you, mate." It didn't even cover my car parking ticket. But what can you do? So during this talk, he's mic'd me up a bit like Mark has tonight, and I thought I heard one of the 5 people call my name. So I stopped talking, and then thought nothing of it and carried on. And then a couple of weeks later, when so the guy that was filming this is the guy that did my documentary as well, so we're quite close friends now. He emailed me and said, "Thought you might find this interesting," and he thinks he picked up the voice that I heard at the time. There you go. So. Doesn't call my name. But they're all adamant that no one called my name. And at the time, I was sure someone went, "Kieran." And for me, you can hear it there. There you go. So, clear as day. And that's what I heard. And when he picked that up on the audio, I was blown away. I was like, wow. Because you feel like I wasn't going mad. But interestingly, after that talk, one of the 5 came up to me and said, "You know, you've got like this big black mass behind you." And that's not the first time someone's told me that. I get told that quite a lot when I do these talks. They say, "You've got this big black thing that stands behind you." And I'm like, "What is it? Like, what do you mean a big black thing? Are we talking like Chris Eubank? Or what are we talking about? what is this thing stood behind it?" And they say, "Well, it's not a shape, it's just like a mass, like a big black cloud." And I've also been told by several people that I have my spirit guide, and it's not that he doesn't like me, he just doesn't like the job. And he's not happy with the job. And you know, many times in my meditation I've said to him, "Look mate, I can sympathise, we're both in the same boat. Neither of us want to be here, let's just get through this shit and move on." But he never appears to me, so he's just there and he's behind me. But people say there's this big black shadow, and Dan, the guy who was filming this, said, "Do you think it was that thing talking to you?" Well, I don't know. So this next bit is a penny. So pennies are very common in this house in Essex, very common. And we've since found out that these pennies are actually materialising out of nothing. And we've actually now sent them away for some analysis to see what these pennies are. Because what would happen is they would get, when we went down to investigate the first time, we walked into the house and I had a penny thrown off my head within 10 seconds of being in the house. Straight off my head. And everyone was in the room with me. And I was like, "Where's that come from?" And she said, "We get it all the time." So what they started doing was they would collect the pennies, put them all into a jar, count them to make sure that the right amount are in the jar, make sure there were none lying around the house, and then when another penny would be thrown, they'd count the jar, thinking, has it come out of that jar? But it hadn't. They were always adding to the jar. We asked for 5s and stuff, but it never bothered. They were getting like New Zealand 10p coins and stuff. They'd never been to New Zealand, so where are these coins coming from? But we now find that the latest ones that are being thrown are stone cold. So as soon as it gets thrown, they pick it up and it's stone cold. And it's like, where has this penny come from? Where is it materialising from? So we're all in there where Lee's just come out of, and this was about a minute after I've had this penny thrown off my head. So we're now all kind of in the sitting area in there, and this area seems to be the portal, this kind of, not portal, but like the acting area. So what's happened there is Elise, who started it all, but I won't go into that, she was sat on the stairs and you can hear it come from upstairs, hit the wall behind her, and then hit the laminate floor and then kind of roll into the room where we are. And then she like panics and runs up. So you hear that initial hits the wall and then hits the floor and rolls away.
I think I saw it hit the
Oh, right, maybe. Well, I've
because
looked
you,
to
because you said so. I was
keener eye than me there. But there is the next video I'm going to show you. You do see it. You do see the penny. So a bit of backstory to this one. So they're getting ready to go out, and he's now picking up a penny on the floor because a penny's just been thrown. Now, can you imagine living in a house like this? In a house where for 3 months during 2019, they all slept downstairs in the living room because they were all too scared to go upstairs. The children were reported being strangled. I mean, I've got a photo on here with some scratches on the back of the 7-year-old's back. They were incredibly scared, and still are now. And these children have had to live through this. And so what's happened here is a penny's been thrown. You can hear the kid shout in a minute, "Did you just throw that?" And then Lee says, yeah, I threw that, just so the kid doesn't feel scared. And then he starts talking to this thing, and they have a bit of a love-hate relationship with this thing. And he tells it, "Don't start this shit now, because we're just going out." And then as he says that, a penny gets thrown.
Hi. What's up, bro?
So he says,
Yeah,
"Did you just throw that?" And he says, "Yeah, that was me."
Oh, my, sorry. Do you want to look at this? You fuck that fucking up. Oh, sorry, I don't know.
So watch here now. There it is. So it gets thrown over him or somehow and hits that bedroom door there and lands on the floor right there. And I've watched that so many times thinking, has he just thrown the penny he's picked up? Has he kind of lobbed it behind him or thrown it over the shop? But he can't have done. There's no way that penny's just come from. You hear it hit the door and land on the floor. So just one more time.
Hi. What's up, bro? Yeah, so sorry. Oh, no, sorry. Do you want to look at this?
So he even turns the mirror around because he obviously has some kind of suspicious thinking. I can't have a mirror facing me.
You fuck that fucking up. Oh, sorry, I don't know.
So now there. You see it can land on the floor. Fascinating. Now these are the scratches on the back. He was having a bath, felt like his back started to sting a little bit, so they kind of had a look and took a photo, and that's what we got. Not nice. And then this is this next piece of evidence is the crowning. This is like fascinating. So is anyone familiar with the Enfield haunting? You know, the Enfield haunting with the no, Chris. No, seriously. You know, with the two girls that were like possessed and The Conjuring did it in The Conjuring 2, I think. Okay. Do you know where I am now? Yeah. Anyway, this house is about 7 miles from the Enfield location. I don't know if that's relevant or not. But one of the famous things that happened at the Enfield haunting was there were two police people in the police people, it's very correct. There were 2 policemen upstairs in the bedroom, and there was one downstairs in the living room, and they witnessed a slipper get thrown from nowhere in the air in the bedroom and hit the floor. But it didn't hit the floor, it disappeared. While the policeman downstairs watched the slipper come through the ceiling and land on the floor at his feet. And that happened at the end. And people don't really talk about that. They're more interested in the girl, you know, that famous photo where she's getting thrown across the room and all that. Now, we captured something similar here. So just to give you a bit of a backstory, this is obviously the upstairs landing, and this here, where this camera is a wall. It's a solid wall. If you watch the documentary, some of the other evidence you can see is filmed from the other end, so you can see what I mean. And at the end of this hallway, there's a solid wall with the bathroom door and what goes into Lee's bedroom in here. So it's just a wall with 2 doors either side. And this camera's motion sensor, so it won't come on until it senses movement, because I was very strict about this, because I didn't want to sit through hours and hours of footage. I was like, if something moves, I'm interested. I'm not sitting watching 2 hours of just silence. So we got motion sensor. The downside to that is it won't kick in until that millisecond after movement has started. So what you're about to see, we've tried to debunk, and I'll explain how we have, but we just can't. So at the time the next video was filmed, it was that period where they were all sleeping downstairs in the living room. And the child has taken off his onesie and his slippers, and they've got into bed. And what happens next is that. So what you're seeing there is the clothes that were just downstairs manifesting out of the ceiling upstairs and landing on a pile of clothing on the floor. So first thing you think there is someone stood behind the camera and just lobbed the clothes. Well, firstly, it's a motion sensor camera, so it would have triggered that someone had walked up to the camera and got behind it, and it's very, very sensitive. So, you know, even if you were kind of stood there, it would probably pick up that you're there and would kick in. Secondly, I'm not the slimmest of guys, but we got a slim guy within the team to really squeeze up that wall to see if the camera wouldn't pick him up, and it did. It picked him up every time. You could see him stood there up against this wall. The other theory people have given me is there's obviously something on the, you know, like a ledge or something on the wall, and this thing fell off. Well, firstly, that didn't fall, it was propelled. And secondly, there isn't a ledge. And again, if you watch some of the other evidence, you can see it's just a plain wall. There's nothing where these could fall off. So, and interestingly, when it lands, you see 2 little points of light fly out, whether you think that's anything or not. These clothes, this is about 2 o'clock in the morning, and these clothes were downstairs when this happened. I mean, explain that. Fascinating piece of evidence.
It doesn't sound like it.
It just looked 2 little lights. Well, I think that is because it's slippers as well, and I think if you get like slippers with like some material on, I don't know, but it's definitely a onesie. It's definitely the onesie that the child had on. I could just watch it all day. It's just a brilliant piece of evidence. Brilliant piece of it. And then, as you say, you see these kind of things flying around as it lands. So in terms of the actual presentation itself, that's me done. But we have got like 10 minutes or so if anyone's got any questions or anything they want to ask or anything they want to watch again. Anybody?
Do you think there's a significant difference between what you would call a ghost as opposed to a poltergeist?
So a poltergeist is classic media manipulation. So people will say, oh, you've got a poltergeist. But a poltergeist isn't a physical thing. A poltergeist is a description of activity. So you get poltergeist activity, which is noisy spirit in German. So if you've got a spirit that likes to do this kind of like quite angry stuff, or if you've got a spirit that likes to take your bin bags out every Thursday, they're technically both poltergeists because they're both committing that act of being a noisy spirit.
Yeah.
We've all been there. You know, she says, "Do you want to take the bin bags out?" God, I wish I had that bloody poltergeist in
I'm talking about the difference between like an aura that somebody might see or sense in some way as opposed to physical manifestations.
The activity.
Yeah.
Well, I think they're both the same, but they're just different stages or different versions of it.
Yeah.
So you're kind of tuning into that energetic field again, and you're picking up on people's auras and people's energy, and then that's the energy that they have contained within them. And when they do die, that's the energy that is released and becomes this kind of activity.
Yeah.
Gary, you had a hand.
Did you have a motion sensitive camera at the other end of that shot?
Over here?
Yeah.
No, the next one we had was, as you go down, you've seen the stairs from the bottom, they kind of go down and down and all that. The next one we had was on the landing here, we never had one on the other side. But like I said, there's plenty of pictures and videos from the other end, so you kind of get a feel for what that end of the hallway looks like. And we did our very best to debug that, and we couldn't, even with the motion sensor camera and everything, we just couldn't do it without it seeing us. Yeah.
How old were those houses?
So the houses themselves, so they're council houses, and they've actually asked to be moved. Can we move? We don't want to live here anymore. But apparently saying your house is haunted isn't a valid enough reason to move house. The houses themselves were about 60 to 70 years old.
67.
60 to 70 years old. They're not that
How was
old.
there before?
So most of Essex was farmland before, and the nearest thing we can find to that building was a Victorian workhouse that was about 3 miles away.
And I would disturb the fairy.
Well, there's a rumour in the close, they live like a little cul-de-sac. There's a rumour that a guy died there, and of course that's what they thought it was. If the guy died here, that's what it is. But actually, we found out the guy didn't die there. He was ill there, but died in hospital.
You haven't connected to anything?
No. If you watch the documentary, you'll get more. I don't have time written tonight, but ultimately, the girl, you know that girl that was sat on the stairs and then ran away? She was in a graveyard, and she was messing around, and she was drunk, and she fell into a pre-dug grave. And then they all went back home, and one of their friends had recently died, so one of the friends that was with them said, "Oh, well, I'm into all this stuff, light a few candles and we'll get talking to them." So they lit a few candles and started a seance. This is about, the early hours of the morning. Lee and Kelly are upstairs in bed, they're doing this in the living room. While they're doing it, the fuse box at the bottom of the stairs explodes, and all the electric goes out. That's one thing they've had constant problem with their electricity. But they've had 4 now, council people go around and sign their electricity off as being absolutely fine. So at this point, it's woken the family up. Lee's come downstairs and said, "What the hell's going on?" "Oh, nothing, we're just talking and all that." So, well, keep it down then, and he goes back to bed. About 3 weeks later, he sat at home, he was on the phone to Kelly, she's working a night shift, and he can hear stuff upstairs. So he's like, "I'm just going to go and have a look upstairs. So she's a complete sceptic, never experienced anything. The house has been fine up to this point. As he gets up, there's 3 distinct knocks on the front door. He describes it as it's how the police would knock if they were coming round. So he goes to the front door, opens the door, no one there. Now I've had people tell me, "Oh, this is it, this is where you let them in, you see. They knocked on the door and you've invited them in." I'm like, "Well, it's not a vampire. It doesn't have to be invited in. And if it's just infinite energy, I'm pretty sure it doesn't need the door to be open to let it in. It could just come in." Anyway, so he's closed the door, said to Kelly, he's on the phone, he said, "I don't know what that was, like knocked door runners or something." So he can still hear this thing going upstairs, these footsteps. So he goes upstairs and captures a really good piece of evidence that I don't have. But, well, I have it, it's on the documentary, I don't have it here. But he goes upstairs and filming in this hallway. So at this point, he's, what you just said there, Gary, he's looking down now at that wall. So he stood here. And you see this shadow fly out of the door. Oh, I might have to get it. Let's see if I can get it. This shadow flies out of the bedroom door into the bathroom door, and the bathroom door slams. And then he backs off, like clearly scared, and the footage ends. And that's it. So from the 3 loud knocks, him seeing that, all hell broke loose. And it's never stopped since. But it just, they're putting it down to this activity at the graveyard and this seance that they did, and inviting that energy in, basically. Any other questions? I'm going to see if I can get this.
I've experienced that in the 80s at the seance, long time ago, the electrics going up.
Yes, yeah.
And that was with the group, and I never went back there.
Well, they've had
a
lot of issues with that. I mean, LED lights, so they technically shouldn't flicker, but they do. They're living room lights. The lady, she sent me a video the other day, and she's got a smart TV, and it's one of those where you can talk into the remote and say what you want to watch. And she's just sat there, the remote is there, she's on her own, and it's coming up with died, suicide, died, being written on the TV, and I'm like, this is just straight from a horror film, like, you know. But she's talking to me. She's like, the remote's there. No one's talking to the telly. I'm just here watching it, and it's coming up with 666666666 and all this, and it's like, what is going on?
But even the Anglican Church, even not the Catholic Church, the Anglican Church have got 5 priests, haven't they, set up?
Yeah. So I got the I tried to get the church around there. So I got in touch with a local church. I said, come round and bless this house, come round and exercise this house. And the bloke said, yeah, I'll do that, but she's got to come to church for 6 weeks. And I thought, well, that's just religious blackmail, isn't it?
They have got those people set aside, haven't they?
They do. So they obviously know there's something going on, yeah.
Interestingly, the connection with electricity.
Yeah.
Saying previously about the connection between like UFOs and other paranormal phenomena.
Yeah.
But one of the things that occurs regularly with UFOs is interference with electrical systems.
Yeah, absolutely right. Absolutely right.
It's all down to frequencies.
It's the frequencies, exactly.
Yeah.
Frequencies
Frequencies that interact with each other.
Okay, so this is the original footage that he films when he goes upstairs. So he's just had those 3 knocks on the door. He's now gone upstairs because he can hear these footsteps upstairs, and he's filming it. So you can also see here the house is not is being decorated at the time. So that's he's got obviously the kids in the room.
Where is it?
So that's that wall where the clothes
Anyone
are out of there.
Anyone there?
You can see. So now watch here.
I can hear you. Where are you?
See that shadow?
Yeah.
Right? Where? Where?
Oh yeah.
But you've seen him, he's a big guy, like, you know what I mean? Like, he doesn't look like
his breath being.
yeah, he is scared, he's petrified. I'll just show you again. Just did you all see that shadow kind of fly across the hallway? It's like a little imp type.
Where is it?
Must be about a foot off.
Anyone there? Anyone there? I can hear you. Where are you? Right? Where?
But we've tried to debunk that, so we've stood behind and tried to make like a shadow appear on the floor and stuff, and we can't do it. We cannot
But
do
from
it.
the timing of that, it doesn't seem like he's that aware of the shadow. He's only aware.
No, he hasn't got a clue.
Standing
She's just the door. He didn't. So I had to tell him. Did you see that shadow? And at the time, yeah, he was a bit. Yeah. I might as well show you some more while I've got this on.
Well, we've learned what
So this is him. He's just come back from walking the dog, and he gets hit by a penny. And excuse the bad language. Get right on the head. Now, this is the damage that the pennies have done on the wall. But what's fascinating about these is they're flat. If you threw a penny at a wall, it would always hit edge on and would leave like a line. This is like someone stood and pressed the penny in, and the skeptics amongst us would probably say, well, that's all they've done. But I've been there and been hit by a penny that no one has thrown.
That to me looks more like the kind of dent you'd leave in plastic, if like, you know the squibs that they use in filming.
Yes, yeah.
It looks like
Yes.
a squib in fact.
I mean, it's hit that hard on that wall that you can see the metal stanchion where the plasterboard's attached to it. It's gone right through. So we'll end on this one because I'm conscious of time. So here he gets punched by something. So again, you might say, well, did he or has he just imagined that he got punched? But I've sent this on to a guy who kind of studies body language and things like that, and he's claim to fame is he used to work for EastEnders, and used to choreograph their fight scenes and stuff to tell them how to. And as you know, in EastEnders, there's a lot of fight scenes. So that normally happens in my house when she wants to watch it, and I say no, having a bit of a scrap. So he sits on the stairs, he's having a fag, and the kids are all playing, and he reacts to something. So let's just watch it first. So something's just happened there, right? So he's just gone into that room and he's told them, keep laughing, be happy, because I've told him, don't be negative, keep the energy up. So you've just heard him say that. He's gone, yeah, keep laughing. So something has obviously just happened, and you can tell that because when he walks out the kitchen, he looks up the stairs. Now he's his own worst enemy because he calls these things all the names under the sun. And if this thing is territorial, it obviously sees Lee as the threat in the house. You know, he's obviously the alpha male, and I've got to attack him. So you hear something, but also what the body language guy said. Well, firstly, he looks, he can sense there's something there. He looks like he knows something's about to happen, and then he actually puts his leg out as he's been hit. So if you were baking it, he said most people would just kind of go and just rock their heads inside, but it's all about the way he kind of looks to the left just before it happens, and then as he looks away he gets hit, and then he shoots his leg out as well, but to kind of like balance himself. And the sound, you kind of hear this connection. So, I mean, make of that what you will, but to me, it's...
Yeah, I felt that.
There's an automatic reaction, isn't it? So
And it's that after reaction as well. He's kind of, that fight or flight's kicked in and he's kind of jumped straight up. Again, the guy said, these are little things that you wouldn't think about if you were kind of just thinking, oh, I'm going to sit here and put on a bit of an act. Yeah, so this thing has mimicked voices. Unfortunately, the poor dog's dead now. But it would mimic the dog's bark, it would mimic their voices, but it would always do it in a way that you knew it wasn't them, like it was trying too hard. So if Lee was at work, he works all hours. You'd hear a voice from upstairs call downstairs and say, Kelly, come up here, lol. Like that. Lee wouldn't say lol, but he's obviously, this thing has heard the kids say it, so he's mimicking it, and he's almost trying too hard, but you think, well, that's obviously not, it's not Lee. And it's not Lee because he's not there. They've had the dog barking in the kitchen when the dog's been out for a walk. This thing is mimicking their voices somehow. A fascinating case. Like I said, do go onto YouTube and watch it if you can. It's called A Haunting in Essex. It's only 3/4 of an hour long. I do talk a lot about it in that one book there. It's a fascinating case. I'm going back down there in December just to have a catch up, and there's a lot going on even now. No, they can't. It's a council house, and they, as I've said, they need a lot of bedrooms. And they've said we need to move because this is haunted, and the council have said it's not an excuse. So, yeah. Yeah, so that's it really. So, any other questions before we wrap up?
Are you continuing to work with them? Do you think will be
Yeah, so
part two?
I'm back down there in December. I want to do a little catch-up video with them, just a little 15-minute interview with them to put onto the YouTube channel. But they had a daughter. Their daughter had a daughter about a year ago now, and during that kind of pregnancy, nothing happened. They had no activity. Since that pregnancy, the one daughter's dad's died, and the mother and father of that young baby have split up, and it wasn't a nice split. So there's been a lot of shit going on again, and as that's happened, the activity's increasing. So they're all focused on this newborn baby, happiness and joy and all that. Nothing's happening. The family lives go to shit again, and it all kicks off again. Right, that's it then. Thank you.
Just something about your motion sensor triggers. You know, you're having a bar.
Yeah.
So, what do you do?
Right, yeah.
There's 30 seconds video.